Good evening and warm welcome to all the participants. We are excited. Even before the recording started, I said warm welcome to everyone. Such is the excitement because this is a landmark session. This is the 150th session on WiseViews platform. The excitement is palpable. And we have a very, very interesting speaker this evening, Miss Sirisha. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Sirisha. Good evening and welcome, ma'am. What I'll do quickly is a brief introduction and then hand it over back to you for your opening remarks on the topic. So I'll share my screen. Yeah, so this is WiseViews Leadership Conversations. We hold these conversations on Fridays. So far, we have completed 149, and this is the 150th session, as I mentioned just now. We have the topic for today, crafting culture, building your company's DNA as you grow. And Ms. Sirisha is helping the conversation this evening. So this introduction and followed by the opening remarks will be for about 25 minutes. And then we'll have two clusters of Q&A and then we'll sum it up all in about 60 minutes or so. I take this opportunity to introduce this wonderful speaker that we have this evening. Ms. Sirisha is a highly accomplished professional with a diverse background in consulting, program management, and leadership development. She's also a certified design thinking practitioner from the famous D School, Stanford University. With over a decade of experience working with Cognizant Technology Solutions, she managed complex, domain-intensive engagements, ramping teams from 5 to 560 in less than 6 months. In 2015, Ms. Sirisha was recognized as one of the global emerging transformation leaders by Training Magazine in the US. Since 2017, Ms. Sirisha has been working on culture building, organization design, and people strategy consulting with a focus on driving 10x growth for her clients. She specializes in business leadership, strategic alignment, culture building, organization design, driving strategy to execution, leadership development, and driving innovation. Her expertise and experience have helped become Aligned by Design, a sought after partner for leaders who want to empower their companies through strategic alignment. Aligned by Design, she is the co founder of this organization. She is also the co author of the book Hope is Not a Strategy, which deals with a systematic approach to culture building. She also has a copyrighted framework to her name. She completed her MBA from IMA, Ahmedabad, and a fellowship in leadership and management from, again, a prestigious Carnegie Mellon University, where she was awarded the Nehru Fulbright Scholarship. This is very interesting and wonderful. Thank you very much, Sirisha Garu, for joining. And we are extremely happy that you have consented to speak on WiseViews platform. And I will take one more moment to introduce our co-panelist, Professor R. Prasad. He's the Senior Director at Academic Wing in ICFAI Group. He brings with himself a rich experience of 3 decades as an entrepreneur, as a professional in industry, as well as an academic, now at ICFAI. He holds a BTech from IIT Bombay and PGDM from IIM Kolkata. Thank you, Professor Prasad, for joining. And we will now straight away stop sharing the screen and request Ms. Sirisha to start the session. Over to you, Ms. Sirisha. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, and a good evening to everybody who has joined. Let me just quickly share my screen and we'll get started. So good evening, everyone. I'll probably take about 20 minutes to talk about this topic that's close to my heart, and I'll briefly cover about why I think that's important. Given we're going to speak in 20 minutes, I'll try covering the foundation of why, so it helps all of us reflect, and a broad of what needs to be done to fix the gap that exists today. And in case there are any questions about the how, we can also deal with those questions when we're doing the Q&A. So we all see so many companies around us, right? Startups that are starting, companies that are growing. You often hear founders say, if some of you are founders, you have founder friends, you hear them say, oh, you know what? We have a fantastic team. We are a team of 10, 12 people who are working, and we're trying to create this product market fit. And, there's no challenge at all. There's no politics at all. We work really hard. We work 14 hours a day. That's the kind of narrative that you hear in young companies, right? Some of these companies do very well, and then they're on their scaling journey, right? Now they find these challenges. What the common things that you encounter is it's so difficult to work with that person or that leader. The culture was very good when we were small. Suddenly, as we're scaling, it becomes very difficult. Oh, every review, we keep arguing about the same things. We don't seem to be moving forward. And you know what? The management is saying this, but what actually it is something else, right? We often hear this narratives. Now, this is the same narrative in a company that 4 years back was a much smaller company where people were talking about a great extent of cohesion. Then the problem manifests a little more, right? It's one function against the other. The narrative you had before 4 5 years was all about, oh, you know what, we have a singular focus, we want to get to the product market fit, right? Now they talk about, oh, product is this, sales did not do that, marketing did not do this, so sales did not work. It's all about everybody pointing fingers, and there's a lot of dissonance in the organization, if I could use that word. And then it further boils down to, oh, will these two people be able to work together? These are the dilemmas that a leader often faces, right? Why do I still have to drive the initiative? Is what the founder might be saying. That I have so many leaders now. Why don't they take it up? And I can take up more responsibility as a leader, but will my team be able to scale up to do things? And some leader who's been there from the beginning will say, I've been doing the same thing 2 years ago. What is the use of getting a team? So typically the narrative boils down to, even if I get 2x people on board, the productivity doesn't marginally improve. It doesn't even come to 1.2, 1.3x. Then companies start questioning, did I do this right? Or, did we miss anything along the way? What typically 90% of the time, I'm not saying this happens with all the companies, but 90% of the time what happens? The management tries to solve these issues. How do they solve? First, they'll say, let's do culture pulse surveys. Let's go ahead and figure out what people are saying about that, right? You do a culture pulse survey, ask people what need to change, and you get all kinds of things, from changing the canteen vendor to, the restrooms not being clean. You get all kinds of inputs there. Then they say, you know what? To build the morale and motivation of the employees, let's start rewards and recognition. Then they start with all kinds of rewards where, and these rewards tend to they don't stay meritocratic or stay true to the name, because what you end up doing there is you're using this for the wrong reason, right? You're not using rewards and recognition as a post facto thing, but you start using it saying, oh, this person got it last time, so let's give them this, let's give the other person this time, so that, they all feel they're being recognized, right? And then they go ahead with all kinds of certifications. They're not able to control the noise internally. So they say, you know what, let's go outside, get somebody to do a survey and certify us to be a great place. Because by now, you're not getting into the problem of not being able to attract the right talent. You start, the challenges in the company start manifesting into people not joining you. So which means your offer to conversion ratio is very, very minimal, offer to joining ratio. Then you have a lot of Glassdoor noise happening, right? All of this, you say, is a reflection of your culture. And so how does the management further try to compensate this? You have all your offsites and your beer parties where, you say, let's get together, let's have some fun, and let's do this as a way of bonding. Does it still solve the problem? It doesn't solve the problem for you. Then you say, you know what, maybe 2 years back, we didn't start hiring people for culture fit. Then they say, let's start going ahead with culture fit. So if you increasingly see, right, what at every stage as a company is scaling, what they're doing is a lot of band-aids. The real problem, while they say it's all problem about the culture, they're not talking about what this problem is, right? So let's take a step back and let's talk about what are these things that the company has been talking about. The first one is the purpose, right? From when they were doing a product market fit, they know where they want to stand, they know what they want to do. So that is the larger problem they're trying to solve. So companies are talking about the purpose. They're talking about culture, okay? But all of these are very vague definitions of culture. And what I like to define culture as is, very simply put, it's about how people behave when nobody's watching. Culture of a workplace is how do people talk together? How do people resolve conflicts? How are decisions made? How are things communicated? What is the level of transparency maintained? What is the level of candor maintained? That, according to me, is what is culture. Values, they're the core fabric of the organization, the core DNA of the company, right? Which shows up in everything that they do. So if I'm saying candor is a value in the company, then in the way I'm making decisions, in the way I'm giving people feedback, both upwards and downwards when I'm giving feedback, candor has to reflect in what you're doing. And alignment is a word that is often ignored in companies, but which is extremely important. Alignment is getting everyone on the same page. We often assume that people naturally get aligned, but it's important to go back and explicitly start aligning people. Now, alignment can be done at different levels, right? Alignment should be done at purpose level, at the culture level, at the values level, right? Now, if we go back to the scenario that we were talking about all kinds of problems that the companies are facing, all kinds of band-aids they're doing in terms of offsites to culture pulse surveys to an external organization certifying that they are a great place to work, all of these put together, what the company is not doing or why none of these initiatives work is because they're not addressing the root causes. To fix any of these problems, even without doing any of these external manifestations in the form of offsites and surveys and somebody else telling you how good you are, what is important is taking a structured leadership action and to drive alignment. What is this alignment about? Alignment on the why. Why do we exist? Because for all of us, a larger than our purpose is what is important. And I'll probably just spend a minute on this slide because why is extremely important because that's what brings the passion for us. A lot of times companies say, I want to become a unicorn or we want to be listed. Now, or we want to get to 1,000 crore revenue. Now, that's probably a metric that matters to the founders. That's probably a metric that matters to everybody who has a stake in the company, big or small. But the alignment comes when you're talking about why do we exist? What is our goal? What is the larger problem we're trying to solve? So alignment on the why is extremely important. Alignment on the how. Now, a lot of times, some companies still define the why, but they don't get about what is the how. By alignment on the how, it's about the desired identity. It's about what is it that I will follow or what is it that we as an organization will do when we're working towards our purpose. What is that, the guardrails that we follow? How are we going to get there? What are the values, behaviors that matter to us and we will not compromise on this? That is about alignment on the how. A lot of times, out of 10 companies, probably 8 companies align on the why, but there are only 2 or 3 companies that align on the how. They don't talk about the desired identity they want to maintain while they're growing. So because of that, think of the dissonance that happens in the organization. There are a lot of people, as an organization is growing, you don't only get people at the entry level, right? You get a lot of people at the mid manager level and the senior leadership level. When you start getting people at the leadership level, what happens is everybody is coming with the baggage of their previous organization or the previous work environments they have worked in. So unless you specify what is the desired identity in this company or what is the alignment on the how that you want all of them to have, they're going to follow what they think is the best. And that's where dissonance happens. Like if an organization says candor is very important, but if a new sales leader who's joined doesn't talk about it, doesn't give feedback, but just does things in the way they have always been doing, then the transparency and candor gets missed for the rest of the organization. So alignment of the how is as important as alignment on the why. And that's what we often see missing. And then alignment on the who. Before you talk about culture fit, right? It's tough to define what is culture fit, but defining who are the right people that you need to get with you along this journey, right? That's a mix of who are people who are aligned to our purpose, who are people who are aligned to our values and behaviors that matter to us, that are non-negotiable for us. And then you get those kind of people to achieve these goals. So one, you have people who are aligned on the vision, on the identity you want to maintain, and have the right skill and capability that they bring to the table to help you achieve what you want. If there's one way organization building has to be done, that is following the 3 of them in this order. This lack of alignment doesn't cost much when you're small, right? When you're small, an obvious question at this stage could be, oh, we never did this when we were small, right? Because the distance of or the gap in communication is very less there, right? It's all about when you're a small organization, customer asks something to an employee talks to the CEO and gets clarified whether something can be done. When you scale, when you become a larger organization, the employee is asking the customer is asking the employee something, the employee has to go to ask someone, who goes and asks someone, who goes and asks the CEO. By the time the entire response comes, either the time is lost or the essence of that message was lost because of communication gap that exists in the organization. And that is where here, what you have a happy customer on your left, today starts seeing that dissonance in the organization. He says, what's wrong with you all? Earlier, you were so much more faster. you were, so much more prompt. And now what is taking you all so long? So that's about why, defining the culture and what is culture and why defining that and why putting up that guardrail is so very important in the organization. Now, the next part is now we know why culture is important, but who has to build it? A lot of times would have heard culture becoming as an organization grows, right? Culture becomes the HR agenda or the people practice side agenda, but a CHRO goal, right? We strongly say culture is a CEO agenda because imagine for running a company, every young company, small company, for running a company, first the CEO will have a strategy. Every company has a strategy. Why do only a few of them scale? Because what matters after having the strategy is two things. One, you need financial capital to scale the business. Second is people, right? Financial capital, companies today, if they have a strong strategy and they have a strong people backing, their investors who put in money to you. So financial capital can be taken care of. If you have the right set of people, you have the right set of leadership, and you have the right set of people practices, which is why it becomes extremely important that it becomes a CEO agenda to be able to run the company. And also, let's delve a little deeper into why it becomes a CEO agenda. We just spoke about alignment becoming a very important thing in the company, right? When a company grows, for a company to grow, alignment on the why and alignment on the how is extremely important. Now, who takes these decisions on alignment? This is where, I will pause a little and take an example. There was a client we were working with, a tech company, very ambitious company, a young tech founder who says, no, I don't think we need to work on culture because we've copied the Netflix culture. I said, fantastic. So he said, yeah, everything, values, policies, we're using them because they have thrived, so we can also thrive. Now, I'll tell you a scenario that they have encountered in the office. So they said Netflix culture. So Netflix came up with this no leave policy, right? So there was this whole noise around no leave policy. So they said, yeah, we also said there is no cap on leave. There's no, people can take unlimited leaves when they want. They just have to inform their stakeholders. Now, the scenario this person has is there's a tech services company and they're losing clients left, right, and center. So we started speaking to the clients who have left them. And what we hear from them is they're a services company. There's this engineer who's supposed to be working with the client. Because this company has a no leave policy, that engineer has applied for 2 weeks leave and has gone traveling. Now, that being a client who's paying them on a T&M basis, a time and material basis, right? Then that client company says, you promised to complete my deliverables on a particular time, but you did not do it because your engineer has left. Now he's followed your no leave policy. So blindly copying all these policies doesn't serve the purpose, right? Maybe some things work for product organization, some things work for services organization. Whatever you call about alignment has to be aligned at all levels. And more importantly, your culture that you're defining has to serve your strategy, has to serve your purpose, the bigger picture that you want to get to. And that has to be aligned with what people want to, the behaviors and actions that you're expecting from people. So we call culture as a collection of dilemmas. You have to resolve these dilemmas to actually get to what is the kind of organization that you want. There's nothing right or wrong, right? What a culture, that one company has versus a culture that another company has need not be the same, right? It is all about dilemma. It's a dilemma. There's no right or wrong. It's a choice of two rights or two wrongs. You have to pick what serves your purpose. And which is why we say it is very particular to every organization and alignment is extremely important. Like I said, dilemmas, choices between, two good options always, right? So what the identity that you want, goals that you have, and the environment you operate in. Like the example that I told you, what works for a product company may not work for a services company when you have your people working on different client roles. Let's take, over the next 2 slides, probably walk you through a couple of dilemmas just to give you a view of what a dilemma means, right? A dilemma often, everybody talks about, we want to create customer delight. Everybody talks about, we want to create employee delight. If you actually think of it, there's a dilemma there, right? Neither of them, you don't need to stick to one or the other. You have to define very clearly. So for instance, let's look at this, right? If you want to create client delight, right? That means client has to get everything when they ask, how they ask, 100% quality, right? So which means you're reachable to the client, you're addressing client problems. Take the example of Zappos under Tony Say. I was lucky to have done an internship with them during my fellowship. And what you see is they're maniacal about customer centricity. So what it means is even the call center person, they're a shoe retailer. Zappos is a shoe retailer which was acquired by Amazon, right? And if a customer calls saying I'm unhappy with my shoes, right? Immediately the refund is done. And then over a call itself, the refund is done to the customer immediately. And then they figure out what is the issue, what does the customer want? Do they want a replacement? Do they want their money? Do they want us to pick back the older shoes? What do they want to do? So that is about customer centricity, right? That is the other extreme of somebody who's always trying to create client delight. Employee delight, nothing wrong in that. Again, there are companies that keep employee at the center. So when you're thinking about it, think about, put an empty chair when you're making this decision, saying, who is sitting at the center? Is it the client or is it the employee? Every decision you make should revolve around this. Now, this dilemma is far-fetched, right? Because this dilemma will deal with everything from what do I focus for my customer? What do I focus? What do I define as delight for the customer? How does my services team operate? How does my sales team operate? How do my employees make a decision? All aspects of the business, this dilemma impacts. Likewise, if I keep employee at the center, all aspects of my business are impacted. What is my customer response time that I'm committing to? What are the kind of turnaround times that I'm committing to my customer? How does my sales team go and pitch to the customer? All of them get determined by who you decide to put at the center, right? So that is why it's a dilemma, and everybody has to take a choice of where do they want to stand. Let me take another example, right? We often encounter this about a professional sports team or a family. Any company, young company, we ask this, right? When we ask them, do you want to be a professional sports team or a family, or are you a professional sports team or a family? The typical response is everybody says, oh, we want to be a professional sports team. We want to have a lot of clarity and we want to win, right? Nobody wants to be a happy family, but 80% of the companies operate in the happy family setup. Now, I'll take 30 seconds to explain what is the professional sports team versus happy family when it comes to an organization dilemma, right? A professional sports team is where every person or every team has a role. Every individual or, has a role to play. And you only get the best people in that. When you're fielding a professional sports team, you look at cricket, you look at kabaddi, you look at football. When you're fielding a team, you put the right people at the right places. Look at a happy family setup. In a happy family setup, what do? We compensate for each other's incompetencies or gaps, right? You compensate for that so that collectively as a unit, you are thriving. So that is the difference between a professional sports team and a family. Again, is there anything right or wrong? Is there a right culture that somebody has to pick? Not necessarily. They're thriving companies that have a happy family kind of a culture, where they have a team. Collectively, the team is responsible for something. Within the team, they compensate for each other's inefficiencies. In a professional sports team kind of culture for companies, they have superstar people there, and they have people who are all thriving. So the onus of making sure they're relevant to the team is of the individual. So the individual makes sure that they are the best in class. People are surrounded by world-class people around them. And so they're thriving. There's nothing, again, right or wrong. There's no one way to look at it. But a lot of things depend on what you choose to be. A company that wants to say, let's say, candor, right? Candor is a very common thing where you're talking about saying what you mean and not hiding things, not mollycoddling things, but also being respectfully direct, right? So you're being direct. Not all companies appreciate candor, but in a professional sports team, what you expect is a lot of candor. But in a happy family, you don't expect a lot of candor because you respect, in a happy family, you respect the collective. It's not about the individuals that matter. So companies can't say we want candor, but we still want to remain like a happy family where we don't have too many conflicts and it's a happy place to be in, right? So it's not too easy to define that. Usually when companies define their values, they pick all the best values that they see around them, right? People have, I've seen banking companies have transparency and candor as their values. When just by sheer regulation, they're not allowed to be transparent. They're not allowed to expose a lot of things that they're talking about, right? So it's easy to pick up random values, but don't look at values as just words or good sounding words or something that is nice to put up on a plaque and put it in the office lobby. But values are deep rooted because, like we said, remember when we were defining those terms, values are the core DNA, the core fabric of the organization on which everything is based. So it has to reflect in everything that you do in the organization. Again, like I mentioned, majority of these dilemmas are all interconnected, right? And that's why it is a leader's agenda, because a CEO or a founder of the company actually figures what are the right decisions to make, what are the right choices to make. And once you make those choices, you stick with those choices unless you decide to revisit where you are. And a common question that always comes is, then once we define, is it done? When I'm growing my company, if I define my culture values, is it done? No. At every step of your scaling journey, typically, if I break up scaling journeys, right, there is a 0 to 1 journey, which is the product market fit journey. There's a 1 to 3 journey, which is your initial burst of revenue that you get. Then, there is a 3 to 10 journey where, people usually break that up also into 3 to 7, 7 to 10. But that 3 to 10 journey is where you're largely exponentially increasing everything that you do. And 10 to 100 journey, which is like a phenomenal exponential growth, right? Which will be multi-geography, 100x, scale of operations and things like that. So at every step of your scaling journey, what you need to do is do this reassessment, recalibration, because what you define today as your culture core values need not be what it is when when your business is scaling. Keep revisiting that to actually know where you are, recalibrate everything that you're doing, everything that needs to change to reach where you want. So defining that journey and aligning your strategy and your culture very strongly and articulating and making sure all your leaders are aligned is what is required to make a company scale. Good. That was a very long peel from me, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the essence of what I spoke about, I think it's
Fantastic.
there on the screen. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Any questions?
Yes, Ms. Sirisha, I think I was trying to just get to the Q&A now. This is a fantastic ABCs of culture and how building culture ground up matters and what kind of challenges that we encounter in terms of people, in terms of processes, in terms of strategy, and how culture is a strategic imperative for the organizations. I think it's a very expansive kind of a topic and very interesting for us to delve into it. I'm sure we get a lot of opportunity to do that while we are into the Q&A. So without much ado, I want to acknowledge the fact that we are joined by some very, very distinguished individuals around the screen. They come from various industries, various cities, various walks of life, actually. And I thank all of them for joining this evening. We'll now get into the first cluster of Q&A. I request Professor Prasad to join for the first cluster of Q&A, and I'll come back for the second. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Thank you, Sirisha, for building up on the topic. Across one's working life, it is very clear that if the CEO doesn't have an understanding of the culture, it's just a question of time before problems crop up. And I think the topic that you have chosen, both the company DNA, organizational DNA, as well as culture, are some things on which we will try and understand a bit more for the audience. Many of these things are soft, and so people leave it at that. So I'll start my first question. It's a bit personal, but it is connected to the topic. Now, if you need to elaborate, on DNA, how did you discover your DNA and how did you build it for your goals, your growth?
Oh, that's fascinating question, I should say, because what I stand for. Actually, I think there's a story that I should probably briefly tell about how it came up, where one of my earlier jobs, one of my first bosses, and I highly regard him, he's still my mentor, asked me to write my obituary. The first day of work, first day of corporate life after passing out of IMA, says, write your obituary. And I was like surprised, what is this person even saying, right? Why should I write my own obituary? He said, no, write 3 things that you want people to remember you for. That became my foundation of identifying my own DNA, what I stand for. He said, think of 3 things, reflect on your life, your 23 years of life, reflect on it, and actually say 3 things that you stand for. So I wrote down those 3 things, and then I said, that's what should be, what I as a person stand for everything. He said, going forward from now, every single presentation you make, every single conversation you get into, you make sure you are doing it you're reflecting all these three qualities, and anybody who sees and talks about you should talk about these values. So that was where my personal, figuring out what matters to me the most, actually emerged, and it just got cemented, got stronger, because I knew what kind of person I wanted to be and what I want to stand for. And coming to different organizations, how I came about looking at DNA of companies to talk about was I worked with a few organizations, and since I was consulting and practice, spoke to even while I was employed, primary role was consulting, right? So spoke to a lot of companies. I realized every company had something that is very core to them. And then I had the opportunity during my fellowship to actually work, interact with, do a lot of research with companies in the US. And then it also made me also realize that there is a huge focus and respect for company culture that leaders out there had. And that's what also made me realize that maybe, in the pace of growth, we're trying to catch up with them who've been existent for too long. But while we're catching up on the numbers, what we are missing is building those really strong organizations that have got the foundation right. Which same as how it is with people, right? Until you get your foundation right, what does it need to establish that? And that got me to come back and start working the same. I hope that answered your question.
Excellent, ma'am. So I think, you've started off with a very important test. Steve Jobs used to call it the tombstone test. And I think that was one of the interview questions for John Scully. And you've also started off, though it's after your interview. And I'm sure that it has helped you to be what you are today. Ma'am, next question. So when you talk about company DNA, now it's a kind of a supplementary in a way. Now, the question I asked you was for yourself. Now, if you were to look at a company and try to understand its DNA or find its DNA, can you give us a use case to illustrate that?
Oh, yes. So I'll talk about a client we've worked with, a tech product cum services company. They also build products. They also work in the services space. Very passionate founders. They want to grow, really make it big. They've got all the right elements. They've been, they've been able to build some products and sell. They're growing as a services company, got a good name. And then they said, you know what, now we are in this place where we can scale up to 10x. So they have this goal of scaling up to 10x. And that's where we started talking to them. Until then, they didn't have a lot of conversation around company, values, culture. Always they were talking about integrity, respect, and things like that, trust and things like that. So if I divide the DNA of a company, integrity, trust, respect is non-negotiable. Like for any company today, right? Those are non-negotiable values because those are basic human values and expectations. So they are non-negotiable. We tried helping them find their DNA. How? We ran them through an elaborate process that we use. We have a foundational framework that we use in the background called Dilemma's Resolution Framework, where we basically break down culture into 60 elements. So we help them think about how decisions are made, how conflicts are resolved, how people communicate with each other. How are people goals set? How do you measure company success? A variety of things we conversed with the founders and their core team. And then we emerged with what was always coming out was every individual in that company the core team was passionate about creating that wow for the customer. So that's where striving for customer delight became their DNA, one of the DNA elements. And then the second thing was they said, if you're getting a problem and you are, you don't give up on a problem, right? You continue to persevere and you try figuring out how do you solve the problem? You use wisdom from outside, you use wisdom inside. So that's where perseverance became a core part of their DNA because every aspect of what they were talking about was not giving up. Directly, indirectly, that was a message coming. So like that, they had a couple of others. So that's how you come up with what is the DNA of the organization, where after running some things for some time, they know what they don't want to compromise about or what is their desired identity as they grow. And that becomes the DNA of the organization. It's just about 3, 4, not more than 4 aspects that will help reflect. It's like, the obituary part story that I told you about, right? So it's about when you think of me, what are the 3 words that come to your mind? Like that, when you think of this company, what are the 3 words that, our current employees, exited employees, our customers talk about? That's how the DNA is identified.
Fantastic, ma'am. What you're saying is that there is a do-how, which you have used in the case of this client, and which goes into how this can actually be done and how you arrive at the result?
Yeah, it's not soft. In fact, I actually say it's like an engineering approach to building culture. You can't let culture happen. If you let it happen, it'll just be something that is way beyond what you expected. And like you rightly mentioned, sir, earlier, that you only realize when the problems start happening, right? So culture building has to be deliberate, proactive, and it is like an engineer's approach to solving a problem, where you break things down into smaller things of everyday actions and then define it.
Absolutely. The know-how versus the do-how, and emphasize on the do-how. Okay, ma'am. I'll take the third question. And now this is about building your company's DNA. Now, typically the word DNA is, gives the feeling that something is hard-coded, though it expresses itself in different situations in different ways. Now, if you want to build on a company's DNA, how do you do it? Again, can you give a use case?
Yeah. So when a company starts, so again there was this small company, 12 people company, I think, when we started with, which was based across different geographies. There were people working from different geographies, building a global organization. Now, core thing, again, right, what you define for your 0 to 1 journey are fundamental, non-compromisable things for the founders and the core group. So we call them the founding group, right? The founders and the core group. Those become the core non-compromisable things, whatever they identify as crucial for them, right? Where they say, this is how we identify this company that we are building now. Now, like I said, this is not cast in stone. Unlike the human DNA, this is not cast in stone. This is where you come to a point where you've done your product market fit. You again do an analysis of it, because by that time you would have learned a lot about your ecosystem, about where you fit in the ecosystem, and about your competitor market in the ecosystem, where you don't have enough time for all of this when you're doing your product. So you do that. That is a place where you again relook at what is it that is going to take us 10x from here. What are the core things that worked for us in the past? What are things that are not working in our context anymore? What is it to make it foundational? Because your 1 to 10 journey is where you'll bring a lot of people at the mid and senior management level from outside, because you start hiring a leadership team at that time. So there, it's important again to pause, reflect, because what happened what served you earlier will not serve you anymore. You need to relook at it. Some things you'll pick from there, some things new you will build. That's again the next step where you build. Like that, every step of your scaling journey, every milestone of your scaling journey, you pause, step back, reflect where you are, know or understand and articulate where you want to be, and then consciously build the DNA that is going to get you there.
Excellent, ma'am.
Yeah, and if I can just add another point there, that is where some people will drop off. Not everybody who's worked with you really well in a 0 to 1 journey need to work in the 1 to 10 journey, right? So there'll be people who will drop off, and that's absolutely okay, because it's good for both the individual and for you as an organization, because they don't match the DNA anymore. Then you know very clearly when is it that people are dropping.
I think what I've understood is that the founder group's core, the non-compromisable DNA, and then you've got the marketplace, you've got the environment, and then you need to build strategy. You got through some experiences in that. Then you ask yourself some tough questions: what worked, what didn't work, and from that you try to distill out something which is needed on top of this. That means there must be an alignment also with that non-compromisable DNA, so that some sort of a pathway is built into the strategy, which then takes on. I suppose that's what you meant, right, ma'am?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, ma'am. I'll take a pause here, ma'am. Thanks a lot for your responses. If time permits, we'll come back later.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. You should have continued. It is so interesting. Well, let me take it forward in my own way. It is said that culture eats strategy for a breakfast or lunch or dinner or all together. Can you give us one Indian example where this has happened in your own experience of consulting or even just a study, so that everyone gets very, very clear idea and indication about how culture is so paramount for us more than certain business strategies?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Since it's a widestream one, I won't take the name of the company, but I'll probably talk about it. So there's this large fintech company which has grown phenomenally in India, and spectacular growth, okay, where was on the pathway to become one of the fastest unicorns and all of that, and got funding left, right, and center. So everything was perfect for the company. They had a strategy and they had aggressive growth. And then things started, because they never worked on their culture. things started collapsing. There were people started raising noises. There was a lot of internal noise that was raised. There was a lot of anonymous messages, mails that were going to the board about how things were going wrong. There were a lot of compromises at an integrity level. There were a lot of compromises in the way people were made to work. There were a lot of compromises in the way promises were made, where there was no question of who gets paid how much and what are the salary structures, what are people's promises. So it was like a one-man army, one person driving the growth of the company, driving phenomenal growth, which made the investor community very happy. But fundamentally, the core fabric of the organization was missing. So, like you said, I will say breakfast, lunch, and dinner culture ate them till the stage it came where it just became a massive collapse of the organization, with lots of cases that were being filed by employees, the lots of cases that were being filed between the leaders. There was lack of camaraderie. At that point, the board had actually invited us to come and figure out what is going wrong, because they were, completely muddled in all kinds of struggles that were going on internally, left, right, center. There was attrition. Everybody worth their name was actually talking to the press directly and talking about what was going wrong. So there was a narrative that the company had to control outside, but they said, while we work on controlling that narrative, figure out what is wrong, because we didn't know anything about it. And we thought everything was going fine because we were only looking at the financial results. And that is where, when we went in, we realized that none of the leadership were aligned. None of the leadership even knew what was core important for the organization. Everybody was promised, if you bring X growth in your business, you're promised Y. So they all literally had a share in the company and the company's growth, which means everybody were going all over the place to make sure their numbers were being met, irrespective of what is happening in the company. So people below, the reason why people were quitting, people were burning out. People didn't know what they had to work on. People lacked transparency. They found leaders constantly fighting with each other, because it's like everybody was running their own business, right? Imagine a company with 7 leaders running 7 different businesses, and each leader has 2 or 3 sub leaders, where they were just randomly doing whatever they need to do without any alignment or bringing it all together. So people didn't know who they were working for. People said, am I working for this leader? Why does he treat me like a servant, right? Why do my goals change every day? So people started quitting. People started raising complaints about what was going wrong. And people started raising complaints about what was being unethical in the company. So we did a leadership alignment session, and you won't be surprised that because the board invited, everybody was there, and we had about 25 people in the leadership alignment session. And we actually told that at the end of it, we actually went back and told the board, you know what, these 13 people are not aligned, and you cannot grow with them on board. It included people from the top, a lot of them. And 6 months, all of them have exited that company. And now they're again reshaping and rebuilding them, because they had their strategy right. The whole reason why this fell apart is lack of alignment and lack of a well-defined culture about what is okay and what is not okay in that company. But it actually took them back 4 years, not 4 years, probably 3 years. And it actually took them back by tons of money and a lot of bad press to actually cover it up, which is why we say, even Dr. Prasad was mentioning about how it, people only realize when the damage starts happening. If CEOs are more conscious, CEOs are more focused on this, and they treat it as important agenda item, you can prevent a lot of this damage to happen before you start recovery.
Fantastic. There are several layers to what you have mentioned, although the direct response to the question was an example and several fallouts, and most of them are visible, and therefore that example serves us as a good learning document for all of us to go by. However, I'm making a few statements, correct me if I'm wrong or wherever I'm wrong, from the conversation that we have just had. DNA is something that you're not born with, as opposed to a conventional definition of DNA, number one. Number two, if culture is so paramount, if culture is so strategically important, culture itself is a strategy, so to say, then don't you think it should go back to people first? That is, the alignment by people or getting the right people. It begins with people. And therefore, again, I'm trying to make it a little bit abstract. It all depends on the founder. It all depends on the person who starts with one single individual. Either the board has to sack the individual or the individual has to sack the board. to make one of them exist, it can be so acrimonious in some of the examples that we see all around us. So going by what you said, we keep learning at every junction, at every milestone of our journey, recalibrate as you mentioned, and then evaluate that. So if that is the case, is it not going back to people first, and we need to put it on the dashboard and say, this is our culture, this is what we are going to be, and then start achieving for it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, nothing that I disagree about. But like, there are two parts to what you said, right? One is going to people first and becoming that organization that is driven by the people. And it's also the founders or the CEO's agenda, right? Sometimes, a founder could also be someone who is right fit for a 0 to 1 journey. Not every founder who's very good in a 0 to 1 journey is capable of playing the role of a CEO for the 1 to 10 journey. Also knowing when your personal DNA conflicts with the organization DNA or what is the best thing for the organization, and knowing when to step back is also, if you reflect on some of the large companies that have grown and we have seen, right? The leader at the top stepping back at the right time and giving ropes to the next, handing over the reins to the next leader is also so important. It's not because the leader is exhausted. It's because the leader's personal biases are limiting the organization growth. So it's both, right? It's about leader and it's also a matter of strategic focus. And that is where, right, what links culture and strategy is the alignment. Both of them have to be completely aligned, right? Your strategy can't talk about something, culture can't talk about something else. Your culture that you build in the organization has to serve the purpose of your strategy. Has to serve your strategy. So your culture should enable you to achieve your strategy. I cannot sit on my fundamental personal goal saying this is what we want to be and then expect that it will become a 10x organization, right? If the objective is to become a 10x organization, a lot of things have to change along the way. And there's nothing wrong changing people if that's what it means. That's what I said. Then it's a respectful thing for both parties because you're not subjecting that individual who's served you so far to actually go through a lot of pressure. At the same time, you're not letting the company suffer because there is an individual whose personal biases are affecting the progress of the organization. So at every point in time, reflecting on who we are, what we want to be, and who, if I talk about myself as a founder, who I am as a founder, what do I stand for, and whether that will work in sync with the growth picture for the organization. I think looking at this from both the lenses is so very important. It's always one trumps the other. So that's where we miss it out.
So it's so amazing. Thanks for this clarification, and I'm sure everyone around the screen is benefited with that explanation. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. What we have read and learned from Ram Charan's book, and what we learned from Build to Last, where it begins with people, and at every stage we need to stay alert. And culture is something much above the founder, or culture is much above the leader also. A majority of the time. That's the explanation that you are given. That's a beautiful and strong point. Thank you so much. Yeah, you want to say something?
No.
Yeah, I was about to say that I'll take just one question and then open the mic for the members who have keyed in a few questions out there. I'll read that out also. If required, I can open the mic. So the question that I wanted to ask is, diversity, gender parity is also part of our culture, right? There is a value, and then how we execute that, and there's a culture around it. So what kind of challenges for building women leadership or bringing more women into workforce has got to do in our matrix of culture building? What some of the challenges that you have encountered, what we also should be aware of? That will be very helpful for all of us.
Yeah. So one thing, probably, I might sound, in all candor, I'm saying, right? People take women leadership as a standalone agenda. Now, standalone agendas don't work because then it gives you a feeling of a quota system. I would want companies to step back. When I normally work with companies, right? I tell them, step back. Why do you need diversity? There are definitely a lot of advantages that women bring to the table, right? Because women broaden the perspective. Women bring in a lot of empathy because that's what comes naturally. And women, they're different, we wire differently, right? Men and women are wired differently. They're different thought processes that come. So a leader or a founder has to appreciate the diversity that comes to the table before they say, okay, we need this woman. Whenever leaders tell me that 30% women, is that okay? Or 20% women, is it okay? I said, it's not about 20 or 30%. It's about where do you want diversity to contribute to what is happening in the organization. And when I say diversity, it's not just men, women, right? There's so many aspects of diversity that we don't talk about today. We don't consider it today because having women has become a flagship agenda of a lot of organizations. We start talking about it. But there is so much of diversity of perspective. Think of tech companies, right? Tech companies getting people skilled in design actually makes even pure play tech. I'm not even talking about product companies, right? Pure play technology coding companies bringing in people with experience in design actually changes the way they write code. And so many proven stories of companies that we have worked with where we brought in that element to just question some of those basic assumptions. So diversity definitely helps. Now, while building culture, one of the important things that we talk about is what is the diversity and what is the purpose the diversity has to serve. Then you see what is the right people to bring in. You always, like I was talking in that alignment process, right? It is always why, how, and who. Why do you need diversity? How would diversity help serve your purpose, and how would you build that diversity? And then decide on who is who are the right people to bring in that diversity. That's when it becomes a strategic agenda. Unfortunately, when people take up women leadership or leadership development as getting X number of women to the top, or, oh, we don't have women in the leadership, just becomes a singular agenda where even after getting, you don't know what you're getting out of it, or you don't know what you should ask for as output or outcome. That's my view on diversity and women leadership.
No, excellent, excellent. I completely agree with you. Diversity or having women on board, having more women in the workforce is not just a politically correct kind of a statement or an initiative. It is a strategic requirement. So as you said rightly, the why of it and the how of it, and then finally the who. To fit into your diversity crucible, you need to work for it. So fantastic. That's a beautiful point.
Because we have to open up for beyond women diversity.
Yeah, it has to.
Unfortunately, because women were the agenda, it became that. But there is so much diversity itself is such a deep topic, and sometimes it might sound, just a very fleeting example is bringing autistic people into actually some of your design exercises gives you phenomenal results, gives them employment. So you're not doing a favor by bringing in diversity. I think I want to change the lens in which people talk about it. You're not doing a favor by bringing in diversity. You're actually getting something out of it. It's a win-win. The moment you start appreciating that as a win-win, then we start becoming more accommodative and we become more true to the diversity that we talk about.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's worth repeating what you said. It helps improve your business. It's a business imperative. It is not a feel-good factor only. It drives your organizational requirements, not a political kind of a stance that you take, and therefore it is so important. Diversity in terms of gender is only one thing that we talk about. In terms of accepting people who differ with you. I mean, this famous example that is given during the war of 1961-62, when John F. Kennedy took charge and immediately he had a meeting with the generals and he said, are we good to go for the war against Cuba? Then everyone said, yes, Mr. President. And they had suffered very bad because there was hardly any dissent or hardly any different opinion. I mean, that is also a cost of lack of diversity. So businesses suffer huge when we don't have diversity. Diversity should be purposefully ingrained because it's going to help you in your business results. It cannot be simpler than that. So absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much. While I am not able to hide my excitement having this conversation with you, I would also like to just take one question from the audience. I will pause here. And that could be, there are questions of all kinds. Someone is asking you to give an allegory of an organism that is for business. And I'm sure that's a big, deeper and good question. But I request Madam Chitra to ask a question. She has a very interesting point that she has mentioned there. Over to you, Ms. Chitra.
Okay, very good evening, ma'am, and good evening, sir. Thanks for taking my question on this platform. Ma'am, just like you said that to build a culture, you have to be proactive, to have well-defined structure, what you really expected or want. So in that case, when a newcomer joins the organization, as you said, coming with a baggage of experience, so how the alignment will come? Because here itself, what I see that there is a less chances of flexibility from organization point of view, because you want that things should be in that way. So don't you think there should be some open door policy which will help in building good culture and bringing alignment in the relation and understanding?
Yeah. So that's a good question. Thank you, ma'am. And one part that we didn't talk about in detail, right? We were talking about building that DNA. The next part, or we spoke about defining the DNA. What we didn't speak about is percolating the DNA. Now, after a company defines who they are, what they want to be, and how they want to work, that is incorporated into every step of the organization process. So, right from the time you are getting someone on board, actually seeing whether this is the culture that that person thrives in, right? That's where, traditionally, well, OB always had this culture fit kind of questions and giving them scenarios and asking them all of that. The right way of using them is to actually create all of those scenarios around your culture, around what is important for you, and posing it to the candidate to actually say what. Step that this gets impacted is before the person actually starts work, the whole onboarding process, the whole induction and onboarding, as organizations call it, getting that person completely aligned, saying, hey, this is what is non-negotiable for us, this is how we expect you to do things, because that becomes your point where even if the person has some preconceived notions about how things work in the previous organizations, here when they come, they know this is what is expected in the organization. So articulating it, bringing all that clarity into that conversation becomes very important. Then the third step is every part of functioning of the organization. Like I was mentioning initially, right? That culture is about how people behave when nobody's watching. So every part of that culture, right? Be it my communication with my coworkers to the way projects get executed, the way work gets done, the way conflicts are handled when you're in high pressure situations, the way decisions are taken, it's integrated into everything in that process. So in effect, for everything, you have like a quasi playbook for everything about how things work in that organization. That's what makes it seamless and easy for the newcomers to do it. And of course, nothing trumps leaders' role. So the leaders become the role models. The leaders have to show all of these in action, right? And we as human beings are fantastic mimickers, right? Right from childhood, we actually see what others are doing and do. And that's how we pick what we call mannerisms, right? Like that. In an organization, people are looking up to their leaders as role models. So role models walking the talk, these processes being articulated, defined, integrated into every process, right from your induction to onboarding to how the person's journey is in the organization. We actually say right from sourcing till the, when you're engaging with the employee as an alumna, when the person leaves the company. Through the entire journey, we make sure every aspect of this culture is integrated. That's what makes it seamless. I hope it answered your question, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. One doubt is when things are so, it seems to be very rigid type of structure. My question then, why the experience is required during the recruitment process? Why you want the experienced people should you hired when those experience are not being counted?
Okay. So I think probably we're missing one part there, right? One, it is not rigid. It is not about something cast in stone. Like I mentioned, probably you pick up 2 or 3 things that are very important for us in the organization. So what were we talking about when we spoke about? I know, sir, can I take a couple of more minutes, sir?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So like I was talking about the organization which picked up, striving for customer delight and perseverance as one of the key values, right? Let's say they pick up one more. Let's talk about excellence in whatever they're executing. Let's say these are the 3 key values. Now, I'm only talking about these 3 values at the time of onboarding and hiring, saying that, hey, you know what? If it's a tech services company, let's say, at the time of interviewing, in a culture interview, one of the questions that will be asked is, you have written a code, you're running risk of delivering it at a particular time, right? Now, will you ship it? Because you have to make sure you're meeting your deadlines. Or will you call out in all candor to everyone saying, hey, we did not, what we have is not great to give to the customer. So let's go back and buy a little more time because we want to stand for delight, right? And if an employee is asking, what do you think is the right thing to do? You always tell them that, hey, for us, shipping is important, but shipping higher quality is more important than just shipping. So then they say proactive communication. So how things are communicated, if you think your project is going to be getting delayed because you want to stick to quality, then you call it out to the customer, not at the time of the deadline, but probably a day before the deadline, saying, hey, you know what, we'll need a little more time. It's only about those aspects, ma'am. We're not making anything rigid. We're making that core fabric, saying everybody in this company will stand for customer delight. Every person in this company is not expected to give up. So you ask them a question at the time of interview saying, was there a time when you gave up on something and why did you give? Then you get an understanding about how much is the perseverance quotient of this person. And that helps you see whether this person fits or not. None of the other things are rigid. And that's where experienced people just need to know what is important in this company. And you're making it clear from day one.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for this clarification.
Yeah, most welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sirisha ma'am, for answering these questions. We are now out of time, but there are some very interesting points. Simple looking question like, is there an alternative member aside of CEO who could probably focus exclusively on developing culture? That was one of the questions by a participant. Two, a very serious or probably looking apparently deeper question like, why nowadays when we start our businesses, should we not have an exit policy? Kind of, questions that have long or serious consequences in your journey to come. There are lots of questions, but at this time, I request Professor Prasad, he has got any other question to ask or any comment to make, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yes, ma'am. My question is an execution question. Whatever we have spoken about, it's being conscious, including in decision making, including in communication, day in, day out, in order to foster that particular culture. So now my question is about the execution side. Let's assume that majority of the organizations don't find the need of bringing in this, which is the reality. I mean, as long as they get the money, they don't think about it. How do you work on that?
So how do we work on that? As in, how do we make them more conscious, or how do we bring that trans?
Yes.
How do we make them more conscious?
How do we make them?
Okay, a lot of times we don't have to do anything to make them conscious. Sooner or later, they hit the roadblocks. And because we've already spoken to them earlier, they realize that, oh, you know what, this is what they were preempting for us. So, we have small reflective surveys and other things that happen with their people, which actually tell you where the problem is starting. So that's where the proactive part of it happens. And consciously, unfortunately, culture is not something where it will start waving the red flag when it starts before it becomes big. You realize the flaws of not building a strong culture when a disaster happens. Like the example that I spoke about, that's not just one company. We have seen at least 20 companies in the last 2 years who have gone through that brink and just managed to survive, and we got them back on track. So unfortunately, it's a larger price you pay, when you let the damage to happen. A lot of founders of late start realizing when they see the first symptoms. And we help founders spot those first symptoms, spot those initial symptoms of where the dissonance is happening and what it could magnify into. And that is where a lot of course correction starts. Another side of founders that we're seeing, another side of leaders that we are seeing, in that I'll split them into two categories. One is second-time founders. Second-time founders would have faced a lot of these challenges in the first time when they were trying to scale up. So second time, right from the beginning, when they form the company, from the word go, they want to be very careful about the culture they're building. So we have seen, are being more open and proactive. And a lot of younger founders, thanks to the kind of education that they're getting, right, are sensitized to a lot of these important factors. So while, the glamour of revenue and becoming a unicorn is highlighted for them, even when they're studying, a lot of times they also get to understand why it is important to build their companies the right way. So we are seeing a lot more of founders who are growing, who want to focus a lot more on their business, and they're looking for the company in the longer term. And then they, pick this up. Other difference is there are some people who build a company precisely for the view of 4 or 5 years, either to sell it to someone or to exit. Those are people who won't work on it, and rightfully so, right? Because when you're not building the idea is not to build a strong foundation, but build a better valuation, then they don't really bother about this. And that's a segment that you anyway can't do much about it. Even life cycle of an employee in the organization is not more than 1 year, 2 years, and they're perfectly okay with that. So those are the kind of companies that we see.
Thank you, ma'am. You have covered some important points, but like Gen AI apps, there will be more questions, but I'll desist from that right now. Back to Professor Rao.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. I think this has been a refreshingly good conversation that we have had over the last 65 minutes now. This is the 150th session, as I said in the beginning. It's a befitting topic and a befitting conversation that we have had. Most of the things that you have talked about points to one very important aspect of getting the right leadership. And a lot of it actually moves from there. Therefore, your services or your help to the organizations is at 2 to 3 points. One is in terms of CEO coaching, in terms of leadership development, or essentially, I'm saying organization building itself. In simple language, if I don't use too much of jargon, it is organization building by building leadership, by actually coaching at a one-to-one level in the CEOs as well. And so that a large number of them work and move in the direction of building templates that will last beyond themselves. And those are one of the most significant traits of leadership that we have always studied and we've always admired. Hopefully, the breed grows and culture is understood as a very, very tangible aspect and a tangible requirement rather than mere glib HR talk. I mean, gone are the days where we've used those kind of words, but then people have to really understand that it is directly impacting your business and business results. I think your work and even your book, I have not read your book, I'll definitely read your book. Hope is not a strategy. By mere wish, you cannot build a strategy, you have to work for it. Perhaps that's the essence. But I also wish and I also request you that you should write a book on templates of building culture. The why of it or why culture is very important. What are the organizations doing or not doing? Therefore, they're not getting it right is one level. The other level is to let's do these things. Let's do these 4 or 5 things very clearly with some examples, research-based kind of books that you should definitely write. And I'm sure.
Actually, our book, Hope is Not a Strategy, which we've got copyrighted, is actually talks a lot about it. It actually gives frameworks for people. It's actually where we've split culture into 60 dilemmas, giving that, like, what I was talking about, the engineer's approach to doing it, breaking it down. What are the questions? So every section of the book has, these are the 15 questions you answer with your team. If you don't find answers, go deeper into this topic because this is where it is. And then we split it further down to say what you want to answer. So even if somebody reads and religiously follows what is in the book, you can build those structures for yourself.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm delighted to know that it's already there. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So engineers' approach to building culture is what is fascinating today's most important takeaway. And as you have already mentioned that it is an intersection of art and science. And this engineer would have taken some courses of liberal arts as well. I mean, that's where it defines, some strong trait towards actually asking for culture and building culture for the organizations. Wonderful. This entire conversation I have enjoyed thoroughly. Thank you so much for being with us. I request you to share your PPT so that we'll attempt one summary and then share it with you. And after that, we'll post it on our archives for the benefit of others who missed this session. They go back and learn from it. This is a learning tool for us and for our viewers, the people who join from various cities every Friday. I thank all of them for these wonderful sets of questions. I request them to join every week again. So, but before that, I want to thank you, and I really admire the work that you have put in such a short span of your corporate experience of corporate life so far. Wonderful, quite admirable. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me over and inviting me to speak. I spoke the most. I think I thoroughly enjoyed speaking, but I hope it was useful for you all. And my presentation also has my coordinates. So in case anybody wants to get in touch with me, feel free to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen and friends, we will meet you next week on Friday of May 24th, 6:30 p.m. We are going to have a conversation with the Managing Director of Coursera. We'll talk about the impact of generative AI and the link to the future of skills, the future of learning. And let's all get together at 6:30 p.m. on May 24th. Till then, go through this website of Align by Design. That's beautiful. There is something called Dilemma Resolution Framework. Go and study that. And probably when you look at the book, Hope is Not Strategy, you'll get greater clarity. Keep learning, keep enriching yourself, and come back for next week. Good night and happy weekend.